Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Hello and welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today we are interviewing someone that when I first came across, I immediately felt like we could be BFFs. Her name is Lindsey Lekhraj, and she is the founder of the Designer Genes Co. She's an advanced certified Epigenetics Human Potential Coach, a double certified Holistic Nutritionist, and carries certifications in life and success coaching, NLP, EFT tapping, emotion code, and Kundalini Yoga and Meditation, and that's just to name a few. So she's right up my alley, as you can see. Her lifelong battle began with her own health, including obesity, chronic illness, hormonal imbalances, migraines, food allergies, and much, much more. She then discovered the world of epigenetics, which connected all of the dots for her. It was holistic wellness at its finest with a DNA-based precision. Now, Lindsey is focused on spreading the life-changing technology of epigenetics to as many live as possible trainings with wellness coaches to help educate the masses. Thank you so much for listening, and I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and I'm really excited today on this episode of the Healer Revolution. I get to talk to my new friend, Lindsey Lekhraj. Hi, Lindsey. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I feel like this is long overdue. I feel like we would be really good friends if we lived closer. I love everything you talk about, so I'm really excited about hearing your whole story and how you got here.
Thank you. Well, it's totally mutual.
Awesome. So yeah, just some people are really detailed with their story and go into like lots of different chapters of their life, and other people talk about it really quick. So whatever feels comfortable for you, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, that's always the question, right? Is like, how far back do we go?
Yeah.
and I guess there's different versions. So I'll give you the abridged version a little bit today. I would say this, for the longest time in my health, into my late 20s, I wasn't into wellness whatsoever. I had a pretty poor relationship with my body. I wasn't taking care of myself like I think many people are kind of doing in their 20s, is trying to figure things out. And sometimes we're not our own priority during that time in our lives. And honestly, like through my mid to late 20s, I started having a lot of hormonal changes. I started packing on weight like nobody's business, and it was really upsetting. It was also something that there was a big part of me, Amanda, that like, ironically, I honestly thought it was like genetic. Like I really and truly believed that, oh, well, there's a lot of people in my family who are like big boned, air quotes, or whatever. I have a brother who's almost 7 feet tall. So it wasn't uncommon for especially some of the women to have just bigger frames, and they're cool with that and like all good. So I really thought that it was one of those things that I was kind of destined for. And then some things really started to catalyze that trajectory. And I actually gained about 90 pounds over the course of a year, actually in about 9 months, from doing the depot shots, the birth control shots. So that was kind of a turning point to where I just kind of went very quickly into like another level, and not in a good way. And so by the time I was really kind of getting almost 30, probably I think 28 is when this really happened. I had this kind of an epiphany moment, to tell you the truth, where I had a big wake up call. Literally, I woke up from a nap one day and I don't know where it came from, because I didn't really consciously pursue this in any way. But I truly like had this big wake up moment of like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your life? And where do you think you're going to go if you don't start taking better care of yourself? Like, what do you think is going to happen here? That sort of thing. And so it was this really strange kind of spiritual event that kind of woke me up to a lot of things. And from that moment on, I started changing a lot of things about my lifestyle. I started eating differently. I started exercising, not to a compulsive degree, but to a point where it was the priority. And it was honestly like I had flipped a switch to where it was like, this is what we're doing now. And this is what's going to happen. And I wasn't really super focused on like weight loss, but it definitely happened. I didn't really have like a big number in mind or anything like that. But what I ended up finding out was over the course of about the next 2 years, I lost about 150 pounds. Give or take. So it was obviously significant. That was about half my body weight. In my largest body, to my knowledge, which I wasn't keeping an eye on it at all. In fact, I was like doing everything I could do to like avoid the numbers on the scale. But the heaviest weight that I remember ever seeing in my life was 305. And so then at probably what I know to be my lowest weight at 155, a couple of years later, was like, I think sometimes the reality is still kind of beyond me. But that was a big part of my journey. So what started to happen was a lot of things. When you go through a massive weight loss that's not, surgically induced or anything like that, a lot of fallout starts to happen, and you're actually releasing a lot of things from your body that your body has been storing in the fat tissues and things like that. So I actually felt pretty good for the most part until I had a consultation one fateful day, and I had a surgeon convince me that I needed to have breast implants. I went to consult with him because being now, like, I think this was actually when I had just like freshly turned 30 and having lost 150 pounds, having like completely done a 180 in my lifestyle. There were certain things in the mirror that I was like, man, this really kind of sucks, because when you lose 150 pounds, it's sometimes like things are not where they're supposed to be. Let's just say it like that. And it was really tough for me being like a single girl and trying to feel good about my body and in my body and all of those things. So I went for a consultation of like kind of like a reconstructive surgery to help to remove some of the excess skin that was really just not going anywhere. So very long story short there, I ended up getting convinced to get some very top shelf implants and also to do a mini tummy tuck. And I did both of those things. And I thought, this is the most awesome thing that could have ever happened to me. This is it. Now we're going to go move on and live our best lives. So as it turns out, it was kind of like, that was another catalyst of a downturn in my health. I had probably a good year. Like there was probably 1 year where I felt really good. I felt like I looked really good and things were cool. We were really pretty much living our best lives. And actually a year almost to the date from the date that I had the implants, I was in the emergency room having my gallbladder out with no prior issues, no prior history of anything like that. So that's when things started to get really strange, and a lot of things in my health started to kind of bottom out. And I spent probably the next 5 years after that. So there was one good year followed by like 5 questionable, progressively worse years where there were just a lot of weird things going on. So my digestion was horrible. So after having the gallbladder out, honestly, like nobody really ever talked to me or taught me what to do from there or how to take care of a digestive system that no longer has that organ. And so that was a big learning curve for me. And then other things were really starting to snowball. So I was starting to have a lot of really strange hormonal symptoms. My body was reacting to a lot of things. I was also in a job at the time where I was fly travel like 3 weeks out of the month until I literally couldn't anymore. And so, I found myself in this position where I actually had to walk away from a career that I loved. Like I was so obsessed with this career path. And I literally turned down a promotion because I knew that it would be more travel involved. And I just had to come to terms with the fact that my body was not doing okay. Like we were not okay. So I made a lot of major life changes. And then, of course, over this couple of years, I had started to get really curious about why is this happening to me? What is happening? Why is it happening? And how can I actually take the reins back in my own health? And I knew that through changes in my diet, they had resulted in some pretty substantial bodily changes. So I really started there. I started studying nutrition from a couple of different, reputable places. And the thing that I thought, or the thing that I found was that everyone has a very different perspective on what's the way to wellness,
Yes.
And so it was almost kind of like the more that I learned, the more confusion I got, or the more I just kept kind of pulling the thread, and trying to figure out, well, who's got the answer for me? Because I refused to accept that I was just going to be one of these like sickly people, like I refused to kind of take on that persona. Like I didn't work this hard. I didn't come this far to only come this far. So that's kind of the nutshell. That wasn't really a nutshell, but that's kind of the foundations of like where I have been, and kind of how I got into working in wellness and helping other people as kind of like a means to a result that I was looking for in my own health. I was truly just trying to put myself back together, and ended up collecting a lot of information along the way. I was actually, I actually did a lot of work in like subconscious mindset work before I even got into the genetics piece, which I'm super, super, super nerdy about. So like, that's kind of like, that's really one of my big passions. So I studied like NLP and hypnotherapy and regression and all those fun, really incredible modalities. And the thing is, like, I had really kind of put my nutrition training aside, and I wasn't really doing any of that because it was like, who the hell knows? Like, I don't know. This camp is like very convincing that you should eat as many plants as possible to feel your best, and yada, yada, yada. And then you have this other camp over here that's like, plants are absolutely the devil and they can kill you, and, everything in between. And so it's like, there's no way that I would tell someone, there's no way that I would take someone's money and enter a relationship, a professional relationship with them and tell them what to do when who knows, right?
I feel the exact same way.
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy how I actually started working with genetics because I had been pretty removed from even the thought of doing like health coaching. Like, oh my God, no way, way too much pressure. And it was really funny. It was a very serendipitous story. A friend of a friend, I was in my good friend's wedding one weekend, and one of the other bridesmaids, who like I never thought I would see again, right? We spent a couple days together at the wedding and we go our separate ways. And then like a week later, she reached out and was like, to the bride, our mutual friend, and she was like, hey, I have this thing that I heard about that I think Lindsey might be into. And so it was literally like a friend of a friend of a friend. It was her contact, worked for the company that I ended up training with. And of course, I thought it sounded really strange, but I was very intrigued immediately. So I got on the phone with this woman who then proceeds to tell me about how you can use genetics testing to actually create a roadmap for a person's ideal wellness foundations. And I was like, full body yes. Like, how fast can I start? Sign me up. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into this wild world of genomics or genetics or epigenetics, or however, whatever you want to call it, whichever floats your boat. It's been a wild little windy road.
Wow. Yeah. Like I feel the exact same way about nutrition. I hate talking about nutrition. Like, do whatever you want, man. I don't have the answers here.
It's really just, there are so many polarizing and like very charged opinions out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People get very passionate about, what someone should do and what someone shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
yeah.
I kind of have to laugh.
And then the other thing that I hear a lot as well for people that have their gallbladder out, either as an emergency or even if it's like we're going to have to take it out and they knew about it, almost no coaching on the changes that happens afterwards, what to eat, what's going to happen. Like nobody tells you anything.
Nothing. Literally, I was told to eat mashed potatoes for a couple of days and I'd be fine.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. So it's really sad. Like it's actually, it was my husband's like childhood family doctor that, he was an amazing surgeon, like an amazing practitioner, but like, really, really probably left a bit to be desired on digestive coaching. So I remember very specifically the day that I was like literally the person who was standing in the grocery store aisle looking probably twisted, and like the cutest little guy in the grocery store came up and was like, do you need some help? And I was like, yeah, I do. And long story short, he handed me my first bottle of digestive enzymes and he was like, I think you should try this. And I was like, oh God, game changer. So it's just wild sometimes the gaps that are left in the system, you know. And also never mind the fact that I was literally on morphine before I was ever never given an option of whether my gallbladder was coming out or not. It was crazy. The long version of that story I'll tell you someday, but I actually ended up going through surgery twice that day, which is a theme that has repeated itself. I have to tell you, okay, this is a really random sidebar, but I'll try to make it fast. So when I went in for gallbladder surgery, there was a stone that was like blocking the duct, right? So they thought, well, we can take the stone out first without having to remove the organ. So they did that. That was one surgery. They wheeled me back. I come back to consciousness. And within 12 hours, they were like, and I don't know what, and there's so many things that like you don't know because you're literally on morphine.
Yeah.
Literally that night, they were like, no, we're going to put her back in surgery and take the thing out. So like they put me through 2 rounds of anesthesia. It's just an insane amount of like medical trauma. A very kind of similar thing happened when I actually had my implants taken out. So I went in for the routine explant. Everything went well. I get home from the surgery center about 45 minutes away, and I was basically bleeding out by that night. And like a very scary situation. The next day, the first thing in the morning, I was back at the doctor's office, had to go back in for emergency surgery the next day for a hematoma. So like, it's one of those things where like, I haven't had a super laundry list compared to some people, but like just the strangest things, like if there's going to be a complication to be had, it's probably going to happen. So that's just what we've come to roll with.
So when did you get the implants out?
Okay, so I got the implants out in 2020, which was a very interesting experience. Early COVID days, going through a surgery, probably one of the most challenging things I have been through in my life. And it was one of those things where I knew that I just really couldn't get them out fast enough. Once I kind of made the decision that was my correct decision, it was like, oh my God, sign me up. How fast can we get this done? And what's really interesting is even with all of the surgeons that are I was in LA at the time, even you would think it wouldn't be so difficult to find someone to take out your implants, but it was a very long waiting list and kind of a little miraculous story that I got in when I did. So yeah, I had them out in July 2020, and July 7th and 8th, I was in surgery for explant, and it was a really tough thing. And, you hear of a lot of women who have them removed and they feel instantly better. And there were little spurts of that, definitely. So like I saw some of the immediate shifts in which I had really started doing some detox work prior to. I actually started in the genetics world. Let me do the math. Early in 19, or was it 18? I could be confused on that. It's about 4 years ago. So I had a little bit of time ahead of the explant to where I could really start opening some detox pathways. And I had to learn what any of that even meant, really. Yeah. But there are certain things that you may want to proceed with caution if you're having something like breast implant illness or symptoms that might be related to a medical device or something like that. So I was kind of navigating those waters for a little while in advance, which I think was very helpful. But yeah, it's taken a while to really recover from that. And, the past couple of years since explanting, it's been more like mitigating the inflammation, trying to stabilize my hormones, and really just kind of get over, again, like some of that medical trauma that I think my body is carrying, and getting to a place where we feel safe. And that's not been the easiest task to do during the past couple of years. But yeah, it's really been just such an enlightening journey, is the nicest way I can say it. Because truly, I will tell you this, like at the end of the day, I wouldn't change a thing. Like there's nothing else in the world that I'd rather be doing than what I'm doing now. And like all of my little war stories, I know are like pale in comparison to some of the things that I hear clients struggling with. And it's just, wow, it's just been such a beautiful process of learning how to not only take care of myself, kind of earmuffs to all of the trends and all of the shoulds and all of the things that you hear these days, and really just kind of learn how to be true to myself and figure out how to kind of keep the faith, if that makes any sense. Like, I know it sounds really cheesy, but I think one of the biggest things is when you're dealing with something, especially in your body, that feels consuming. To me, it's like the most challenging aspect is the mindset sometimes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So that's something that, gosh.
Yeah. That's really beautifully said. I agree. And even all the horrible things almost every person I've had on the podcast has been through, they're like, it taught me how to be myself. It taught me how to take care of myself. It taught me to break generational trauma and, also help other people in the process. So for anyone listening that's just really going through it right now, there's always the light at the end of the tunnel and the reason.
Yeah. There's always an answer. So literally, like that's my biggest thing is like, don't let someone tell you that this is permanent. Don't let someone tell you that this is, you're doomed. It's not, it's not the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like how you were like, I'm not having this diagnosis. This is not going to be forever.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of that really does go back to that one day, that kind of like wake up call day where I literally just heard the most clear message of like, you're meant to do more than this. And if you're going to achieve whatever it is that you're here to do, if you're going to fulfill your purpose, you got to get it together. Like you can't just accept whatever fate you might have started to believe was your path, because that's simply just not true. So,
yeah, I love it. So let's move on to what is epigenetics? Like, what does that mean in comparison to like 23andMe and getting your DNA tested?
Yeah, that's a great question. So epigenetics is, I would say, 10 shades deeper than genetics. So epigenetics is really taking into consideration all sorts of lived experience. So whether that be medical history, certainly medical traumas, also, childhood events, things of that nature, really mindset, perspective, stress levels, all of the things that truly are impacting our genetic expression, even truly like toxin exposure. Like this is a huge thing to consider. It's a major factor in the way that your body's going to perform. All of the above. Like there's a laundry list of things, which is the best news. It's literally not just one thing, right? So it's like a whole slew of things that can actually work towards your favor or against you in some cases, depending on how you're wired. And so we're looking at genetic analysis, but we're actually going a step further into a place of empowerment and understanding like, okay, cool. So I have this particular patterning in my genes. This is what I need to do to maintain that or to prevent certain things from coming to the surface. You kind of have to know how to play the hand, right? So like genetics, I always say, is kind of like the cards you've been dealt, but epigenetics is your best hand, because there's always a best hand, right? There's always different ways you can go. And so it's truly getting really, really strategic about your lifestyle. So yes, to some degree, nutrition and the things that you're eating, but also things like however you're prioritizing sleep and the types of exercise and, hormonal balance and all of these things that can be really customized to a huge high level. So it's a lot of fun, and it actually takes a lot of the myth busting to like the next level. So a lot of the trend diets, for example, you can literally see like, okay, this is really not going to fit well for this person genetically. Or you might see in some cases, this could be something to do for a short time or limited run, but long-term, this is, incorporate a little more of this or a little less of that. So it's really just the coolest thing I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, so we ran my DNA, and there was some definitely eye-opening moments where I was like, that's amazing. But there were some other things I was like, that's not really how I feel though. So it's very complex. Like for example, the gene where I metabolize caffeine really quickly,
Yeah.
I was like, that's not typically my history. Like I felt like I was a really bad caffeine metabolizer. Is there situations like that where the genes are maybe switched in a certain way, but you may not feel that gene as much, I guess, is my
Totally.
question.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I always advocate about like working with someone on it for interpretation so that you have somebody to talk through these things with you, because it's a ton of information, right? And if you
Yeah.
take everything at face value, there's gonna be a lot of things that don't land.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where like a lot of the automated testing, they can really give you like very surface interventions or suggestions, number one, for liability purposes, but number two, because they don't really know anything about you. Like, yes, they have your genetic sequencing, but they don't really know anything about you other than that. They don't know anything about your current health status, anything about like exposures or anything like that. So, when it comes to something, well, there's a lot of big things where this can be a factor, right? So any of the detox pathways, I would say, like, it can vary greatly as far as like what might fit well for you right now versus what might have been a fit 10 years ago or 10 years in the future. The genes don't change. So like there's some things that will be kind of a more static suggestion, but for the most part, you need someone to kind of guide you through it, or at least to kind of help you to get an understanding of where it all fits, right? So, especially with something like caffeine, there's going to be other factors like different nervous system factors, right? Also, digestive things. So, I mean, even with coffees, I know we're both Team King, but there's a lot of people who don't know anything about like quality of coffee, or like what they would consider to be like a good brand might in fact be something that's like super moldy, or you just never know. So those are some of the factors, even if someone has a little bit more awareness or is maybe a little bit further along in education or in their journey to whatever aspect, there's always going to be things that can come along that can actually move those genes or the performance of those genes one way or another, whether it's left or right, So yeah, I think that's a really good example of epigenetics versus just genetics. Because if you do, I can guarantee you this, if you build your life around an automated genetics report, it's not going to feel great. It's just, there's no way they can actually automate those types of considerations.
Have you had to give up coffee for health reasons? Maybe because of the stress it was putting on your adrenals, maybe because it was messing with your sleep, maybe because you felt terrible after drinking it, or maybe because you were told coffee had mold on the beans and you needed to stay away from mold. Well, what if I told you there's an organic, mycotoxin-free, quality coffee that contains reishi spores or Ganoderma lucidum? Ganoderma lucidum helps to modulate your immune system, adapt to stress, balance hormones, and doesn't give you the jitters or shakes like regular coffee used to. Sounds too good to be true, right? It's called King Coffee by the company Organo. And King Coffee came into my life when I was struggling with chronic hives, full body eczema, and mast cell activation syndrome. I hadn't drank coffee in years because it made me feel anxious, shaky, and clammy. So I had no expectations that drinking King Coffee would be any different. However, I decided to give it a try after seeing lots of amazing practitioners talk about the benefits of reishi online. I tried a 7-day sample and the chronic hives were gone by day 5. I was in shock. After that, I dove into the research on reishi and found that there are over 3,000 peer-reviewed PubMed clinical trials using reishi Ganoderma as an intervention. The company Organo also has a patent protected on their harvesting process. They double crack open the spore shells which makes them up to 80% more potent than the body of the reishi, which is usually used in other reishi products. This also makes the spores 90% more bioavailable for your body to use. If you would like to try King Coffee, visit thehealerrevolution.myorganogold.com, or for a 7-day trial, you can check out my link tree on my Instagram at Amanda Panacea.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I mentioned when I first contacted you was the company I used in the past. They didn't even answer my emails to give me my raw data. They just had like a little app. And I was like, no, I need more than this. I need to talk to somebody about it.
I've seen a lot of scammy things over the years. Even just kind of being in the industry, just really coming into like my 5th year, there have been so many companies like fly by night, things pop up, come and go that seem very convincing. And even like in my early days, like I would buy a lot of them, like a lot of the tests that where you could like upload your data and stuff like that. And I would be just shocked at like the crap that they would give me back. Like some of the things that they would tell me to eat were like very much just opposing, I guess you could say, from what I was taught. So definitely I would say like buyer beware on a lot of those things with the automated testing, and just kind of keep in mind, like there's going to be a major limitation on the accuracy and really in the interpretation or perspective that you're getting. So yeah, unfortunately there's a lot of really subpar automations out there. And they sound really cool. And I'm sure at some point the technology is going to catch up. But to me, like I will say this, I don't foresee it ever really superseding like a human interaction, just because there's so many different factors to consider in a person's life. It's really difficult to kind of automate that or to put some metrics on those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so with epigenetics, you technically don't need to do this more than once, or if things change, I guess we know we can change our genetic presentation. Do you do it like once every 5 years, or what's your opinion on that?
Usually one time is good. Now, the thing that will change is more of like the expression of certain genes will absolutely change. So that's where, for someone who's having, for example, a huge response to histamines, that's something that can definitely ebb and flow, right? So it's a little close to home, right? So I think depending on your environment, depending on other factors and exposures, that's something that will ebb and flow, but it's not necessarily going to change your genotypes. So truly, it's one of those things where like the sooner the better. Like I only wish that I would have been able to have this testing like 10 years ago. But we do the best we can. And I will also say in the same breath, it's really never too late. I work with people, and I work with a lot of clients' parents, and honestly, like even my parents, my mom and dad, I've done readings for, and they're honestly like in the best health they've been in like recent history, which feels just beyond words good. But truly, both of them made significant improvements just by learning how to support things like their unique methylation patterns, histamine to some degree for my mom for sure, really dialing in some of the gut health stuff that we can actually see in the genes was like revolutionary for them. And they're honestly the cutest cheerleaders. So they tell people all the time. And they'll text me and be like, hey, I told my chiropractor about you. He's going to call you. Like,
That's
cool.
adorable.
Yeah. So it's never too late really to see improvements. And I think it's also really cool to think that like, there's I've literally never seen anyone who's like too far gone or too complex,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the thing I like about it. It's a very empowering modality. It doesn't feel like, and I will say, ironically, I think a lot of people get nervous about what they're going to learn or maybe what they're going to be told about their genes. But almost everyone most people that comment, they say, this is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Like, I'm not so bad off kind of thing,
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have the epigenetics. The other modality that I love that you do that I also love is peptides. So this is a huge conversation. I don't need you to go into like all the details of what peptides are. But maybe if you wanted to give a list of like some of your favorites and what modalities they work on.
Yeah, definitely. Peptides have been really helpful for me. I will say I cannot pass go without mentioning my OG, one of my favorites, BPC 157, changed my life, like truly, like kind of gave me my life back to a large degree. And this was one of the biggest things that actually was a result of learning my genes, was that a lot of the really popular clinically studied leaky gut supplements are not well suited for everyone. And I'm one of those people. So a lot of the things that I was taking, like L-glutamine, like collagens and things like that, to actually help with leaky gut, they were making me worse. So actually learning to kind of go outside that box and start to dabble in some of the peptides. BPC was the first peptide I ever took, and it was truly like a godsend. Within probably days, and maybe a week, I literally started to see like a 180 in my digestion. My body started to calm the heck down. It was really just revolutionary. So it's undeniable. When you start to feel results like that, I always say like there's no magic pill, but if there were one, that would probably be the closest thing. And actually, that's one that does work really well in capsule form. So the thing about peptides is that they're typically given through injection, which it honestly took me a while to work up the nerve to actually inject myself. And once I did, I was like, oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
We're good. Cool. But it's intimidating, but this one, the BPC actually comes in capsule form, and it's actually very effective, especially for gut modalities. It's really great. And so I would say that's kind of my ride or die. And it's not something that needs to be taken long-term necessarily. It's not necessarily harmful if it is, but you don't need it all the time for most people's interventions. The next ones I would say that were super, super helpful for me, I would say I'm a big fan of Motsi. That's probably my second favorite. Motsi, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with because it's very expensive. It's like one of the most expensive peptides, but damn, it's good. It's a mitochondrial peptide, so it actually can help with a little bit with glucose sensitivity, but really, it's going to basically turn up the mitochondrial function, which is actually something that I am genetically very poor in. So really, I should probably be on MOTS a lot more often than I am. It makes me feel like Wonder Woman. So that one can be supportive for a lot of different purposes. I just did a round after my experience with COVID in August or late July. I did a round of MOTS in August, and it was just, they just work so fast, like almost just a couple of days later, you're like, wow, here I am, I'm back. So that's probably my number 2 favorite personal. Man, I've been dabbling with a lot of them lately. So a couple of topicals. One that's been really on my radar personally has been Kisspeptin. Have you heard of this one? Mm-mm. So Kisspeptin is really cool. It can be taken by males or females. It's actually great for libido, hence the name Kisspeptin. I mean, I'm guessing that's why it is named that.
Yeah.
But it's actually really great for like hormonal production as well. So it can be taken to boost individuals who have signs of like slightly lower testosterone. It's a nice little, very gentle support there. So I'm a big fan of that one as of recent. What else? There are so many, and that's so fun. They're like literally, depending on if you poll 100 people for their top 3 peptides, you'll probably get 300 different answers. Mm-hmm. But there's so many that actually have very similar functions. And that's where I get really fascinated, is like learning about some of the chemistry that's involved in creating these peptides, and like which ones are cousins, so to speak, and how you can kind of like really just kind of dial in based on what you're looking for, your perfect formula, and like stack different things. I can get very nerdy about peptide stacks.
Yeah, I tried a lot of them, and I honestly can't say that I felt very quick changes like you have. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of the weight loss ones. Nothing happened. I did a lot of the histamine ones and immune system ones, but these were also during like my sickest moments. So I'm like, maybe I should revisit the immune system ones, come back to them.
That's really interesting. With MOTS, I had that experience. So when I first took my initial round of MOTS, I lost like 15 pounds, like in 6 weeks, which was like very significant for me at the time. I had been having some major weight loss resistance and like stuck on like one little zone. And this was also kind of coming out of my explant days, and like really had just kind of maybe 6 months in, started to get really focused on strength training and stuff like that. And just, I was feeling good, and I was seeing a little bit of change in body composition, but like the scale wasn't budging. And literally like within that first month and a half I was on MOTS, things started to move to where I was like, okay, like this is what we needed. And it was great. And then actually in August, when I did another round, didn't lose a single pound, felt amazing, but didn't lose a single pound. So you're kind of like, oh,
Interesting.
Okay, whatever. But yeah, that was actually like, I think when I needed the most mitochondrial repair, because I just had COVID.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's interesting. It's kind of like your body will absorb and it will prioritize what needs to be prioritized, I think, in some cases.
Always. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. So on the topic of weight loss, this is the last thing I wanted to kind of touch base with you on. What are your secrets?
Yeah. I think when it comes to weight loss, there's been a very big learning curve for me. And I will tell you, at 40, things are very different than they were at 28, when I first really started to get into this whole, this pursuit, I guess you could say, of optimization. And I don't really think there are a ton of secrets. I will tell you this. I don't think that there's a magic pill. I don't think that there's a magic peptide even. I think it's really about the most awareness that you can possibly have. So like, where's your blood sugar? Where are your hormonal levels? Like what exactly is happening that's preventing you from getting to where you need to be? And I think it's just one of those things that metabolic conditions are so complex. And it's fascinating. And I definitely don't feel like I have all the answers for myself at this point. I'm still kind of dabbling a little bit in some hormonal replacement. So that's kind of that's my next thing that I'm like, pioneering a little bit, or personally pioneering, not that I'm the first by any means, but I'm just kind of working up the nerve to start getting into experimenting there. And I think all signs kind of point to yes, as far as like where I'm at chemically with those things. I've had a couple of practitioners tell me I was basically in like an early perimenopause after coming out of explant surgery, or like whether it was the explant or like the 6 years that I had a bacterial infection, by the way, from the day that I had the implants put in. So that was kind of crazy.
Oh, wow.
So it's interesting to see like, okay, what exactly was the domino that kicked everything over? But I think that as far as like having a fat loss goal, I think the things that I will tell you that I have learned that are working better now, definitely strength training over cardio. So like building muscle mass, helping your body to actually kind of like, what's the word? Almost kind of like override the system when it comes to burning off things like starchy carbs and sugary things and stuff like that. Definitely, if you're having any flavor of like insulin resistance, there are so many cool hacks that you can do that will actually help your body to like force override the system, right? To like be more efficient with the glucose handling. So whether that's a supplement or a peptide, or you're actually just going to like bust some squats after you have some dessert, it's just the coolest thing. So that's kind of the world that I'm in now, is like really optimizing that aspect, and starting to train my body to be a little bit more flexible on the things that it burns. So I think there's a fine line there of like, when you go into maybe looking at like doing a different dietary intake for a specific amount of time. I've been getting to know carb cycling a lot, or like actually it's kind of like a newer version of carb cycling. So I've been doing the Joel Green protocol. I studied with him this year. He does the immune-centric fat loss approach, which is honestly like fascinating. It is so freaking cool. He goes into the depths of like biochemistry of why people are carrying fat and all that entails, and also what happens as you lose fat, and how the body wants to regain fat and things like that. So he's got some very interesting perspectives, and I've kind of taken his baseline methodology and adapted it, like kind of remixed it with my genes, if you will, to make it work for me, and to make it things that I would actually eat, because, he's amazing. And he's also a bodybuilder. And sometimes bodybuilders don't eat things that I would actually eat. So that's been fun.
Yeah, I started following him after you posting about him, and I really love some of the hacks he has. Like my boyfriend has sleep apnea, and he has a hypoxia pack that I was like, we're going to get niacin and do this immediately.
Yes. And did it work?
Oh, we haven't done it yet.
Okay. You have to report back.
Yeah, I will.
He is honestly like one of the most genius people that I've ever been around or been in proximity to. And it's one of those things where like you have to pay very close attention, because when he starts to speak, it's just 0 to 60, and it's like all of these like mind-blowing things. So it was very interesting to go through his coach's course, and also to kind of like sift through and kind of make my own little, okay, what's in this for me kind of thing. Because of course he teaches to like a variety of styles of individuals. So he's got some just cutting edge philosophies on just like biochemistry that blow my mind.
Yeah.
So that's been actually really insightful in this part of my journey.
Yeah, it's very biohackery, very masculine energy, though.
Very yes to both of those. I will also say, I think one of the biggest things, like to kind of bring it back to the mindset piece, I think anytime you have a goal of fat loss, it's very, very important to watch your perspective of self and to let it be led from a place of nourishment and not from a place of punishment. And I think that that's the part that many, particularly women and probably men too, but I think that's the hardest part for me, was to be able to go into that place of like, hey, I'm going to not eat so many carbs because they're not actually making me feel good. And it's not about restricting foods or being on a diet. It's about, hey, this is what's actually helping me sleep better at night. And this is what's actually helping my body be more metabolically fit and longevity wise, like this is in my best interest. But the perspective, even for like some of the same interventions, I think the right perspective can go a long way and just feel a lot different in the day-to-day,
Yeah, this is a conversation I have with everyone. The intention you put behind the action is everything. Yeah. If you're in a bad mood, thinking this isn't going to work, why am I doing this? I hate myself. I want to change. I need to be fixed right this second. It's probably not going to work.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
And do you love Bruce Lipton, how he talks about how your mindset impacts your genes?
That was actually Bruce and also Dr. Joe Dispenza. Like these were the first guys that I heard the word epigenetics from. And of course, I was like deep into that world with the NLP stuff. And like, that's what I plan to do forever, was like mindset. And I guess I still do. I definitely still do. But their perspective on exactly that, how your perspective of self, your beliefs of self can absolutely engineer the trajectory of your body. I believe it 100%. I'm like walking proof of that.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, like, and also the fact that any of those things can be changed in the blink of an eye. You can change your path. You can change who you are. Like literally, you can decide to become someone else. So if it's something like, I'm doing a fat loss group right now and we're kind of halfway in, and it's, the first half is always easy. The first half of like playing by somebody's rules is always, you're full of motivation and hope and a bit of excitement and all of these things. And about 3 weeks in, where you're just like, dang, the new is wearing off. And that's where it has to become part of your personality. It has to become a lifestyle, and it has to become just the thing that you do. And so, yeah, I'm so into the mind body connection through that vehicle of like identity roles, essentially,
Yeah. Fascinating.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I could totally just open a can of worms there.
All right. Well, let's close it. Maybe next time we'll come back around to this, because this is also like my favorite topic too. But I would love to ask you like how you did some trainings in the epigenetics and then you started your coaching practice.
Yeah.
What does your business structure look like? How did you turn your situation into a thriving business? Because I love your marketing. I think you're super good at that. I wanted to ask you, was your previous job in like marketing, PR and all that?
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. Well, I actually, my first degree was in marketing, which I feel like a dinosaur because that was in like the early 2000s, which was, I mean, not before the internet, but like practically. So it's kind of funny. I wonder how much of any of that is still relevant today. Probably a lot. But maybe the eye for it or the passion for it is still there a bit. But no, I was actually in the beauty industry for many, many, many years. And it's really interesting because in the beauty industry, my more recent roles were really all about helping support business owners and teaching mostly women how to build businesses and grow their businesses and be profitable and all of those things. So really, I guess it should be no surprise that this year I started kind of going in a little bit of a different path and actually teaching coaches how to do what I do and to essentially not only teach them how to read genes and apply them to their practices and incorporate other modalities and things like that and create a business that they love, but essentially scale and like have a thriving business that supports them and supports as many people as possible. And that's kind of been the dream the whole time is like, okay, I'm one person and I'm like shouting from the top of my lungs that like, this is the coolest thing. This is something that changed my life. Like this was the answer for me. And that's great. But there's only so much that one person can really do, right? So there's only so many clients that I could see. There's only so many reports that I could read personally. But now I'm basically going through and teaching others how to do the same thing. And it's growing and it feels so good to be able to take other health coaches and other practitioners. And I mean, there's actually a really good mix of, well, they're all women so far. So we'll see what happens. But it feels really, really good to be able to take these people that have such a passion like we all do, right? And to empower them with new tools and new perspectives and really new ways of supporting their people. And the thing with epigenetics that I think is so cool is that you can make so many different you can make it look so many different ways. So I have one girl that's going through, she does preconception, and I have a lot of peers that focus on that aspect of it. There's another woman who has a background in fitness. And so she's more of like implementing things for personal training and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And being able to also kind of layer in some of the nutritional aspects and all the relevant things. But yeah, it can definitely go a lot of different directions. So that's what I'm pretty amped on right now is like, how do I empower other people and help them to build similar type businesses and get this work into as many people's lives as possible. But at the same time, I'm still doing readings. So I'm not ready to, I'm definitely not ready to retire. I don't know what it would look like, honestly. Like if I think about stepping back from taking clients, it doesn't feel like the right time. So I definitely still enjoy seeing clients. I do readings and also work with a few clients quarterly on a deeper level. So we do a little bit more testing sometimes when it's relevant. We work closely and we even do like subconscious work together and things like that. So I kind of keep my hand in all the pots, you know?
Yeah. I feel ya.
So far, that's feeling really good. We'll see where we go next year and we'll see where we land. But I think the teaching role is something that's been very true to my spirit. And so that's the part that feels really great now to kind of pass the torch on to other people who are either, some of them are actually starting out very green in the wellness industry and just were maybe intimidated by other modalities before. And this is something that's, it's basically foolproof, right? So you're getting this entire like pretty dense workup on someone. You're going to be able to support them at a high level without just, going back to what we were saying earlier about the nutrition camps where it's like, man, it's kind of like throwing darts of what best to someone. So it's kind of the opposite of that. It just feels really, really good. Mm-hmm. So yeah, whoever would have known that little old me who woke up that one day and decided to lose 150 pounds and, stop living on fast food and beer would be here teaching people how to be genetics coaches.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm so glad we got to chat and get to know each other a little more. Well, really, we all get to know you a little bit better.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Tell everyone where to find you.
Yes, find me at thedesignerjeansco.com. I know it's a mouthful. I'm the Designer Jeans Co. on Instagram as well. I'm usually hanging out there. That's kind of my main social media. Yeah, there's tons of different videos and things on my website that you can learn more about epigenetics and what it is and how it can serve you and how to get started.
Awesome. All right, Lindsey. Well, we'll have to make a part 2 where we go deeper into the NLP, subconscious, and all of that stuff.
Let's do it. I'm down.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much for listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, please do me a favor and like, subscribe, leave a comment, anything that can help get this information out to more people who may be struggling. You can also find me online at thehealerrevolution.com or amandapanacea.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at amandapanacea. Thank you so much for joining the revolution.